I'm going to be showing you how to use Puppet Warp in this video. Puppet Warp is a selection tool. It basically allows you to rig a drawing as though it were a puppet. To me, it's kind of like a crude intermediary between 2D and 3D animation. So essentially, it allows you to move certain components of your drawing the way you might in a 3D animation program. The problem obviously being, not the problem, but the limitation being that you are still working with a two-dimensional object, not a three-dimensional object. So you can see I have a photograph in the background. You can play around with photographs if you want, and then I have a separate drawing on top. This is already a smart object because I brought it in from a separate file, but if you draw on top of your photograph on a separate layer, most likely your layer will be what's called rasterized, which basically just means that it's something you can still edit. The second I turn this into a smart object, it is something that I can no longer edit. Okay, but this is also going to retain the rigs, the little tacks and points I put on my figure, so that I can move it around like a puppet. So I'm going to zoom in over here. All right, rename this cat. All right, and Puppet Warp is over here in the edit tool in your file. Your file. In your top toolbar, where file and all those other things are. Anyway, edit, Puppet Warp. All right. You'll see my cursor turns into this little tack. Sometimes this mesh will pop up. This, for some reason, helps some people visualize like the way it's stretching. It, to me, is just distracting, so I turn it off. So if for some reason when you turn it on, you have a mesh and it doesn't look just like mine, just turn off the mesh in the control panel. Okay, so what I like to think about is that when I am rigging this object, everything about it is rubber. Okay, and obviously it's not actually made out of rubber, but if it's as if I am tacking something that is stretchy and rubbery onto a cork board. So I want to make sure that I'm tacking down any areas that I don't want to move while I, work with other points. So I'll just show you. If I tack down this like kind of knee area of my cat, and then I tack the ear. If I move the ear, it is going to stretch everywhere except for where my other tack is. Obviously, I don't want that. If I want my ear to move somewhat, I would want it to be stable in other areas. So I'm going to tack down either side of the ear so that when I go into, get a little closer, when I go in to move this guy, and it's been being finicky lately. I'm not really sure why. It's very obnoxious. But you want your cursor to turn into this little black cursor that I have right now, instead of a tack with a plus button by it. But now that that is highlighted, I can move it around. Okay, there we go. And you'll see now my object is functioning differently because the ear is tacked on either side here. Obviously, my tail is still kind of wanting to go in that direction. The body is still wanting to go a little bit in that direction. So I need to tack all of the areas that I don't want to move down. Like I said, it's been finicky recently. I think maybe I have 2 tacks in the same area. So I'm going to use my delete button and just delete that extra tack. Man, they're just being really finicky right now. Alright, well, I'm going to go through and tack down the rest of this. Alright. My computer's also going kind of slow because I have limited storage at this moment. So if your computer is going slow and you can offload anything onto your OneDrive or an external hard drive, that might make your computer go a little bit faster. I've been trying to do that, but I think Sometimes when I'm screen recording, it just goes slow. So, you know, I'm just tacking down all of these little areas. You can also think about this as maybe making your puppet. Where do you want things to swing from? What are the like joints that you're creating to make sure that this object moves? So I am pinning down the stomach because I don't want it to move around when I'm moving other things. But I'm also like putting little joints by the, you know, knees so that when I move the legs back and forth, they function properly. Okay? So the reason that turning this into a smart object works really well is now that I've set up my tacks and I hit this plus button, it gives me the smart filter down here. If I do not have, if this is not turned into a smart object, it does not add this filter down here. And the reason that is important is as I duplicate my layers, I can re-access the tacks that I've placed instead of having to put down new tacks. And that's huge because that does take a while. So make sure that you turn your drawing into a smart object before you rig it. All right. So before I start getting started with my tacks, I'm just going to move my cat over slightly. You'll notice that I have my my selection tool or move tool turned on. All right, so that I can move this object around. And now I'm going to double click on the puppet warp so that I can move the legs. Okay. So like I said, it's a little bit finicky sometimes. Just, you know, work with it. Move this backwards. Or maybe I'll leave it right there and I'll move it back in the next one. Move this one forward slightly. I really should have more of a gap between these two legs so that this one moves a little bit more independent of this one. They're kind of stuck together in this drawing, but I'm going to make it work, as Tim Gunn would say, the best that I can. Like I said, just, you know, kind of try to work with your cursor, even though it's being a little bit obnoxious at times. Okay. Actually, like I said, I'm going to leave that one as is. And I can, you know, move the tail slightly. And the ears, if I can get to them. Cat ears are constantly moving. So just giving him a little bit of natural movement. Okay. And we're done. Okay. So then I would continue to duplicate this over and over again. So I'm going to, and when I'm duplicating, I'm just taking my layer. I'm going to undo what I just did and show you again. Clicking on it, holding down Option key and dragging up. All right. And that duplicates my layer. Going to move this over again. If I wanted to kind of rotate the cat so that it's not just going forward but up slightly, if I zoom out and hit Command T, it gives me this this box around my cat. All right, and I'm just going to rotate on that corner and bring it up a little bit. Rotate a little bit more and bring it up. So now it's kind of starting to tilt upwards. I'm going to again go to Puppet Warp. If this starts to get distracting to have all the cats in the background, you can certainly turn off the visibility of them, okay? Once I'm not in Puppet Warp, obviously. I kind of forgot about that for a second. So when I don't have these tacks turned on, I can turn the visibility off. But that just allows me, almost like onion skinning, to see what's going on. So, you know, it's useful, but if it is distracting to you, you can turn it off. Come on. Sometimes it wants to add a new tack. You can see that it's trying to do that right now. I'm really shocked that it's being this finicky. Okay, it has not been this way in the past when I've used it. The dots have been very easy to select. So I haven't used it in a while. Not really sure why it would be more problematic than it once was, but anyway, it's been frustrating me this evening. I guess I'm just going to try to delete that one. It won't let me select that one back there. Alright, well, I'm going to keep going with the demo so the video doesn't get too long, but, you know, troubleshoot these things. It might maybe be, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it's maybe attack from a cat behind, like one of the other figures, but it doesn't fully make sense. So, I'm not sure why I'm not being able to select that button. But anyway, so I apply that, and you'll see now I have, you know, these 3 cats that are moving. I could have done more movement. One thing I can also do is select all the tacks on the head in order to move this head up and down. So this is going to take me forever, but bear with me. I'm going to hold down my shift key in order to select all the tacks at once. I always tack down the eyes just because any kind of stretching happening in the eyes is weird and it looks a little bit bizarre. So I just like to kind of keep them safe by holding them in place so that they don't get distorted. That's why I put tacks in the eyes. You could kind of play around with trying to make them look in different directions maybe, but that's why I put those down. So now that I have the whole head selected, I can move it around, okay? And so obviously you can experience a lot of really excessive warp in this, and for some kind of intentions that might be great. Like, I don't know, if your drawing is getting possessed or it's being stretched and then it's going to, I don't know, shatter, whatever. But in this case, I'm just wanting to move my head, you know, a little bit, slightly, make, you know, some gentle movements with the kind of bobbing up and down. So I'm just going to, you know, pull the cat over to the side a little bit so that there's a little bit of movement in the head and apply this. Okay, I can obviously go on. I would need to go on forever with this, but I'm just going to show you how I'd animate it. So I'm going to go down to create frame animation. All right, and then I'm going to go to this tool right here and make frames from layers. You may have watched this on one of the videos that I posted on the blog last week. If you have, you don't have to follow on from here. But I'm going to select these 2 frames because I don't need a blank frame and I don't need a frame for my background. Obviously, it's creating 1 frame per layer, but this is going to be turned on all my layers and I don't need a white background. So I'm going to delete those. Yes. And now you can see I just have my little kitty frames. Great. But I still want them to have a background. So I'm going to select all of these by holding down my shift key. Okay, selecting all and turn on my background. And now I have a little animation with my cat. I can change up the timing if I want it to last for 0.1 seconds or 0.2 seconds. I wouldn't go higher than that because otherwise the cat's going to be going very slow. But you could make some of these longer, like if the cat is stopping to ponder or look at something. The other thing I'll mention is if I wanted my cat to eventually walk down this pathway, I would obviously need to create 2 or 3 more drawings, right? This figure could maybe walk up a little bit, but then I would need to replace it with a cat that's slightly at an angle that maybe moves a little bit, and then a cat where I'm seeing the back part of the cat, and then that cat moves away and gets smaller as it goes on. So just because you're using Puppet Warp doesn't mean that you won't have to create more than 1 drawing. I mean, maybe you create an animation where everything is seen from a profile view and that's fine, but the idea behind this and me showing you this is that you can reuse the same drawing more than once. Not the same drawing for the entire animation perhaps, but instead of having to draw this cat with just slight differences in the legs, I can use the same drawing of the cat 5-10 times just to get it to kind of walk across the screen and then turn around and pounce and maybe go down the path or whatever. I'll show you this one. This one obviously has, more frames in it. And you'll see that my cat kind of walks over, all right? And his tail moves a little bit. So there you go, Puppet Warp.